The rain pelted against the Manhattan office windows as Sarah Chen Martinez packed her belongings into a cardboard box. 8 years of building relationships with Chinese clients, reduced to personal photos and thank you notes written in Mandarin. The security guard waited by the elevator, his expression sympathetic but professional. Her phone buzzed with a WeChat message from Li Wei in Shanghai. Sarah, heard rumors about changes at your company. Everything okay? She stared at the message, throat tightening as she realized she'd have to break the news to dozens of people who trusted her. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the framed photo of her and the Beijing delegation at last year's trade conference. Their genuine smiles contrasted sharply with the cold efficiency of today's termination meeting. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the empty cubicles. Her supervisor, Janet, had barely looked up from her laptop during the 15-minute meeting that ended her career. The irony wasn't lost on her. Fired for cost-cutting just 3 months after bringing in the company's largest contract to date. A $50 million deal with a consortium of Chinese manufacturers, dismissed as if it meant nothing. The elevator dinged softly as Sarah stepped inside, watching her reflection in the polished steel doors. A 34-year-old woman who had dedicated her prime years to building something that could be destroyed in a single afternoon. The corporate buzzwords echoed in her mind. Restructuring, new strategic directions, changing market priorities. As the doors closed, she wondered how she would explain to her Chinese partners that their American sister was no longer their bridge. The city lights blurred through her tears as the elevator descended, carrying her away from 8 years of her life. The next morning, Sarah sat in her small Brooklyn apartment, nursing her 3rd cup of coffee and staring at her laptop screen. Her phone had been buzzing nonstop since 6 a.m., with notifications from WeChat, LinkedIn, and WhatsApp. Word was spreading through the tight-knit Chinese business community like wildfire. She'd spent the sleepless night crafting individual messages to each of her major clients, explaining the situation with as much dignity as she could muster. Her heart broke a little more with each send button she pressed. The responses had been immediate and emotional, expressions of shock, anger, and most touchingly, offers of support. Mr. Zhang from the Textile Consortium had written, "Sarah, you are not just our business partner, you are our friend. This is not right." The sentiment was echoed across dozens of messages, each one a testament to relationships built not through corporate training manuals. These were connections forged through genuine respect for Chinese culture and values, late-night calls to accommodate time zones, and personal attention to each client's unique needs. Her small apartment felt suffocating as she realized that while she'd lost her job, she hadn't lost what truly mattered: the trust and respect of people who understood what loyalty meant in business relationships. These weren't just professional contacts. They were part of her extended family. David Chang's call came at exactly 9 a.m., and Sarah recognized the international number immediately. His voice was tight with controlled anger as he spoke in rapid Mandarin before switching to English. "Sarah, we just received notice that your company is assigning us a new account manager," he said, frustration evident in every word. "A junior employee who doesn't speak our language and has never been to China." She explained the situation, her voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. David's response was immediate and decisive. "This is unacceptable. We've been working with you for 6 years, and you understand our business, our culture, our family values." The disrespect was clear as David continued. "This new person sent us a form email introducing himself, didn't even use our proper names correctly." Sarah could hear the frustration building in his voice as he added, "We're not just business partners, Sarah. You attended my daughter's wedding in Beijing. You know my father's favorite tea." His words carried the weight of genuine relationship building that transcended mere transactions. "You understand that business is about relationships, not just quarterly reports and profit margins." As they talked, Sarah felt a mixture of warmth and sadness, warmth for the genuine connections she'd built, and sadness that her former company didn't understand the value of what they'd just thrown away with such casual disregard. The calls continued throughout the day, each one following a disturbingly similar pattern of shock, anger, and ultimately, decisive action. Mrs. Liu from the electronics importing company was particularly direct in her assessment of the situation. "Sarah, you helped us navigate the tariff changes last year. You stayed up until 3 a.m. to join our board meetings in Shanghai time," she said, her voice carrying years of accumulated trust. "You learned our regional dialects to better communicate with our suppliers, and you always remembered our cultural holidays." The frustration was palpable as she continued. "Now they send us some boy who can't even pronounce our names correctly and expects us to trust him with our American expansion plans?" Sarah found herself in the unusual position of trying to defend her former company while secretly feeling validated by her clients' reactions. Each conversation reinforced what she'd always known, but her corporate employers had never understood. In Chinese business culture, relationships weren't just important, they were everything. Trust takes years to build through consistent actions, cultural sensitivity, and genuine care for business partners' success. But that same trust could be destroyed in seconds through disrespect, cultural insensitivity, or the assumption that relationships could be transferred like assets on a balance sheet. By noon, Sarah had received calls from 12 major clients, and the pattern was becoming alarmingly clear for her former company. They weren't just unhappy about the transition. They were actively considering ending their relationships altogether. That evening, Sarah sat in her favorite dumpling restaurant in Chinatown, a place where she'd brought countless clients over the years. The familiar sounds of sizzling woks and animated conversation in Mandarin provided comfort during her professional crisis. Mrs. Chen, the owner, brought her the usual order without being asked, soup dumplings and jasmine tea, and sat down across from her with a knowing look. "I heard about what happened," Mrs. Chen said in fluent Mandarin, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who'd built her own business from nothing. "Your Chinese friends are very angry. They've been calling each other all day, talking about how to help you." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as she realized her professional relationships had transcended mere business transactions. The restaurant filled with the familiar sounds of clinking chopsticks and animated conversation, and Sarah felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced in her sterile corporate office. Mrs. Chen continued, "In China, we have a saying, when you respect others, you respect yourself. Your old company showed no respect." The warmth of the community around her was palpable. Other diners who recognized her nodded sympathetically, understanding that she was one of them now. As she ate her dumplings slowly, savoring both the food and the moment, Sarah wondered if losing her job might actually be the beginning of something better. A chance to build something of her own, supported by people who valued her not just as a business asset, but as a person who understood and respected their culture, their values, and their way of doing business. The next morning brought news that would change everything and set the stage for what was to come. Sarah was checking her email when she saw a message from her former company's IT department that made her blood run cold. "Your access to the client database has been revoked, and all your business contacts have been transferred to your replacement," it read with corporate efficiency. The coldness of the message stung, but it was quickly overshadowed by an urgent call from Li Wei in Shanghai. His voice carried a mixture of excitement and determination that she'd never heard before. "Sarah, I have important news," he said, speaking in rapid Mandarin before switching to English for emphasis. "We've been talking. All of us. Your real friends in China who understand what you mean to our businesses." Li Wei's next words hit Sarah like a lightning bolt, changing her understanding of the situation completely. "We want to work with you, not your old company. We're going to start canceling contracts and finding ways to work with you directly." The implications were staggering. Her clients weren't just expressing sympathy or moral support, they were prepared to take concrete action. Li Wei continued with growing excitement. "We're going to show your old company what happens when you don't respect the relationships that built your business success." His voice carried the weight of collective decision-making as he added, "You didn't just lose a job, Sarah. They lost their connection to China, and they don't even realize it yet." As she hung up the phone, Sarah felt a mixture of terror and exhilaration, unlike anything she'd ever experienced. The bridges she'd built over 8 years were about to be tested in ways she'd never imagined. The phone calls started early the next morning and continued throughout the day like a coordinated campaign. David Chang called first to inform her that Eastern Textiles was immediately suspending their $8 million annual contract, pending a comprehensive review of their business relationship. His voice was calm but determined as he explained, "We've been loyal partners for 6 years, but loyalty must be mutual." Mrs. Liu's electronics company followed suit within hours, putting their $12 million import deal on indefinite hold. "We cannot work with people who don't understand the value of relationships," she stated simply. By lunch, Sarah had received similar calls from 6 other major clients, each one expressing their dissatisfaction with the transition. More importantly, their intention to reconsider their partnerships entirely until the situation was resolved to their satisfaction. The messages were remarkably consistent across all the calls. They weren't just unhappy with the new account manager's lack of cultural competence. They were deeply offended by the way Sarah had been treated and the assumption that business relationships could be transferred like assets. "You don't just replace someone's daughter," one client said, using the familial term that carried deep cultural significance. Sarah found herself in the surreal position of trying to calm clients who were more upset about her firing than she was, while simultaneously realizing that her former company was about to face a crisis entirely of their own making. The Chinese business community was tight-knit, and word traveled at lightning speed through WeChat groups and industry associations. By evening, Sarah's phone was buzzing with messages from clients she hadn't spoken to in months, all asking the same pointed question. Sarah spent the following days in a whirlwind of calls, meetings, and increasingly emotional conversations. Her small apartment had become an unofficial crisis management headquarters as she worked around the clock. She tried to balance her loyalty to the relationships she'd built with her desire not to actively harm her former employer. The situation was spiraling beyond anyone's control, and she found herself working harder than ever, just not for the company that had fired her. Her clients were asking increasingly pointed questions about their contracts, requesting detailed explanations of services, and demanding to meet with senior management. The new account manager, a 26-year-old MBA named Brad, was clearly overwhelmed by the cultural complexities and relationship dynamics he'd inherited overnight. Sarah felt a genuine pang of sympathy for Brad. He'd been thrown into an impossible situation with no preparation or understanding. He was trying his best, but his form emails and corporate speak were like gasoline on a fire of cultural misunderstanding. The clients weren't being unreasonable. They were being Chinese. They expected relationship-based business practices, face-to-face communication, and respect for established protocols that had taken years to develop. But sympathy didn't change the fundamental fact that her clients were rapidly losing confidence in her former company's ability to serve their complex needs. Word was spreading through the Chinese business community like wildfire. This was a company that didn't value relationships, didn't understand cultural nuances, and most damaging of all, didn't keep faith with the people who had built their success in the first place. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon when Sarah received a call that she'd been both expecting and dreading. The CEO of her former company, Robert Harrison, was on the line. She hadn't spoken to him since a brief handshake at the office Christmas party, and his voice carried the strained politeness of someone trying to manage a full-blown crisis. "Sarah, we need to talk," he said, his usual corporate confidence replaced by something approaching desperation. "We've had several clients express concerns about the transition process, and I think there might be some misunderstandings that need to be cleared up immediately." The careful corporate language couldn't hide the panic in his voice. After 8 years of building the company's Chinese client base, she was finally getting a personal call from the CEO, but only because their bottom line was being threatened in ways they'd never anticipated. She agreed to meet him the next day at a neutral location, curious to see what he would say. More importantly, whether he truly understood the magnitude of what the company had lost when they fired her. As she prepared for the meeting, Sarah realized that this conversation would determine not just her immediate future, It would determine the future of relationships that had taken years to build through patience, cultural sensitivity, and genuine care. Relationships that could be destroyed in a single moment of corporate arrogance and short-sighted thinking. The irony wasn't lost on her. The company that had fired her to save money was now facing potential losses that dwarfed her annual salary. And they were finally ready to listen to what she'd been trying to tell them for 8 years about the true value of relationship-based business practices. The meeting took place at an upscale hotel in Midtown Manhattan, the kind of place where corporate executives went to have difficult conversations away from office gossip. Robert Harrison looked older than Sarah remembered, his usually perfect appearance showing clear signs of stress as he sat across from her in the hotel's quiet lobby. Dark circles under his eyes suggested sleepless nights, and his normally immaculate suit looked slightly rumpled. "Sarah, I'll be completely direct with you," he began, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd been getting increasingly uncomfortable calls from the board of directors. "We've lost 3 major contracts this week alone, and several other clients are threatening to follow suit. I need to understand exactly what's happening here, and how we can fix this situation immediately." Sarah felt a moment of dark satisfaction. The man who had signed off on her termination without a second thought was now asking for her help. The same executive who had seen her as an expensive line item was now realizing the true cost of his decision. She explained the situation calmly and professionally, detailing how Chinese business culture actually worked in practice. How relationships were built over years of consistent trust and mutual respect, not quarterly performance reviews. How the company's ham-fisted approach to the transition had offended their most valuable clients in ways that went far beyond simple business disagreements. Robert listened with growing alarm as she outlined the scope of the problem, his corporate confidence crumbling as he realized the full implications. The cost-cutting measure of firing her might end up costing the company millions in lost revenue and damaged reputation. "What would it take to fix this?" Robert asked, his voice carrying a note of desperation that Sarah had never heard before from any corporate executive. She leaned back in her comfortable chair, considering her words carefully, as she looked at the man who had casually destroyed her career just 2 weeks earlier. The balance of power in the room had shifted completely, and they both knew it. "The problem isn't just that you fired me," she said, her voice steady and professional despite the emotions churning inside. "The problem is that you fundamentally misunderstood what I was doing for this company for 8 years. You saw me as an expensive employee who spoke Chinese and handled difficult clients. But my clients saw me as their bridge to American business culture, their advocate, their trusted partner in building something together," Sarah continued, watching Robert's face grow paler with each word. "These aren't just business relationships that can be transferred with a memo and a handshake. They're personal relationships built on trust, respect, and cultural understanding that takes years to develop." The hotel lobby buzzed with the quiet conversations of other business meetings, but Sarah felt like she and Robert were in their own bubble of reckoning. She could see him calculating in his head the immediate cost of the contracts they'd already lost, the potential domino effect as word spread through the tightly connected Chinese business community. The growing realization that his strategic restructuring had been not just a mistake, but a catastrophic error in judgment. "When you fired me without consulting them, without even informing them properly, you essentially told your most valuable clients that their relationships didn't matter to you, that they were just account numbers that could be reassigned at will." "We want you back," Robert said, the words coming out in a desperate rush, as if he'd been holding them back throughout the entire conversation. "Whatever salary you want, whatever title you need, whatever resources you require, we'll make it work. Just please help us save these relationships before it's too late." Sarah felt a complex mixture of emotions washing over her. Vindication for being right about the importance of relationship building, anger at the casual way her career had been destroyed, and a surprising amount of pity for the man across from her who was learning the hard way that some things couldn't be fixed with money or corporate restructuring. She'd spent 8 years building something precious and irreplaceable, only to watch it be casually discarded in a 15-minute meeting with HR. Now, with the company's Chinese revenue stream in free fall, they wanted her back as if nothing had happened. as if trust could be restored with a better offer and a corner office. "It's not that simple, Robert," she said, her voice gentle but firm as she used his first name for the first time in their conversation. "You can't just flip a switch and restore trust that you've broken through your actions. My clients aren't just angry about the transition process or Brad's lack of experience. They're angry about how I was treated, how their relationships were disregarded, and how your company showed its true values when it thought no one was watching." Robert's desperation was palpable as he leaned forward, his corporate facade completely gone now. "What do you want then? What would it take to make this right?" he asked, and Sarah realized with crystal clarity that he still didn't understand the fundamental issue. This wasn't a negotiation that could be resolved with better terms or financial incentives. This was a reckoning with the consequences of treating people as disposable assets rather than valuable partners in building something meaningful together. Sarah looked out the hotel window at the busy Manhattan street below, watching people hurry past in their daily routines, and felt a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. The answer had been forming in her mind since Li Wei's call, but now it crystallized into absolute certainty. "I don't want my job back, Robert," she said, her voice carrying a conviction that surprised even her. "What I want is to start my own consulting firm, helping Chinese companies navigate American business culture the right way, with respect, understanding, and genuine relationship building as the foundation." Robert's face went through several expressions as he processed this information: confusion, alarm, and finally a kind of grudging respect. "You're going to compete with us directly," he said. And it wasn't a question, but a statement of dawning realization. Sarah nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders as she finally spoke her truth out loud for the first time. "I'm going to show the market what real relationship building looks like in practice," Sarah continued, her confidence growing with each word. "My clients don't want to work with your company anymore. They want to work with me, with someone who understands that business is about people, not just profit margins and quarterly reports." The conversation continued for another hour, with Robert alternating between trying to convince her to return and trying to understand the full scope of the damage his company had done to itself. He offered increasingly desperate terms: equity stakes, profit sharing, complete autonomy over the Chinese division. But Sarah had already moved beyond thinking about her former employer. By the end of their meeting, she felt like she'd finally closed a difficult chapter of her life and opened a new one, full of possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine. The fear was still there, but it was overwhelmed by excitement about building something of her own, something that reflected her values and respected the relationships that meant everything to her. The next month was a whirlwind of activity as Sarah worked around the clock to establish her new consulting firm. Her small Brooklyn apartment became a temporary office, with her kitchen table serving as conference room and her laptop connecting her to clients across multiple time zones. She navigated the complexities of starting her own business while managing the expectations of clients who were eager to work with her directly. The paperwork was overwhelming: business licenses, insurance, tax registrations, and legal contracts that needed to be perfect from day one. Li Wei flew in from Shanghai to help her set up the proper legal structure, bringing with him a preliminary contract from a consortium of Chinese manufacturers who wanted to establish comprehensive U.S. operations. "This is what we've been waiting for," he said, his excitement infectious as they worked through the details late into the night. "A true partner who understands that business is about people, not just profit margins and corporate policies." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah as she worked 18-hour days to get her firm operational. Her former company had fired her to cut costs and improve efficiency, but in doing so, they'd inadvertently given her the freedom and motivation to build something far better than what she'd left behind. Her phone rang constantly with calls from Chinese business leaders who had heard about her situation through the tightly connected community networks. They were offering support, advice, partnership opportunities, and most importantly, their business. The response had been swift and decisive. They were voting with their wallets, and the vote was overwhelmingly in Sarah's favor. Word of mouth in the Chinese business community was incredibly powerful. and her reputation for cultural sensitivity and relationship building had preceded her into entrepreneurship. Every day brought new opportunities that she couldn't have imagined while working within corporate constraints. The formal launch of Chen Martinez Consulting took place in a small conference room in Brooklyn, with video calls connecting her to partners in Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou, and Hong Kong. Sarah had never felt more nervous or more excited as she looked at the faces on her laptop screen. People who had supported her through her darkest professional moment and were now ready to bet their businesses on her vision. The technology allowed them to share this moment across time zones and continents, but the emotional connection was immediate and powerful. "Today, we're not just launching a consulting firm," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the ocean through fiber optic cables. "We're proving that authentic relationships can overcome corporate bureaucracy, that trust is more valuable than quarterly earnings reports, and that treating people with respect isn't just good business practice. It's the only sustainable way to do business in today's interconnected world." The applause from her video conference participants was accompanied by the sound of champagne corks popping in multiple time zones, and Sarah felt a deep satisfaction that went far beyond simple professional success. She had found her true calling, and it was built on the solid foundation of relationships that had survived corporate upheaval and emerged stronger than ever. Her first week in business brought in more revenue than her former company was paying her in monthly salary. More importantly, she was working with people who shared her values and understood that business success came from genuine partnerships, not just favorable contract terms. The future looked bright, challenging, and full of possibilities that she was only beginning to imagine. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. 6 months later, Sarah sat in her new office in Manhattan, smaller than her old cubicle, but with a stunning view of the harbor and walls covered with thank you notes written in both English and Chinese. Chen Martinez Consulting had grown to 12 full-time employees, all of whom shared Sarah's deep commitment to building genuine cross-cultural business relationships. Her former company's Chinese revenue had dropped by 60% as clients continued to migrate to her firm or simply cancel their American operations entirely. Meanwhile, her own firm was turning down new clients because they couldn't handle the demand for their services. The contrast was stark and telling. Relationship-based business practices weren't just morally superior, they were more profitable in the long run. Every day brought new validation that she'd made the right choice in striking out on her own, rather than returning to a corporate environment that didn't value what she brought to the table. The phone rang, and Sarah smiled as she saw David Chang's familiar international number on the display. His voice was warm with friendship and professional respect as he called to discuss expanding his U.S. operations with Sarah's help. "You know," he said, his tone carrying years of shared history. "When your old company fired you, they thought they were cutting costs and improving efficiency. But they actually gave us all a precious gift, the chance to work with someone who truly understands that business is about building bridges between cultures, not just counting money and maximizing short-term profits." As Sarah hung up the phone after their productive conversation, she looked out at the harbor where ships brought goods from around the world. The symbolism wasn't lost on her. She was now part of the bridge that connected East and West, helping businesses navigate not just language barriers, but cultural differences that could make or break international partnerships. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. You just have to be brave enough to see the opportunity hidden within the crisis. Sarah's story began to spread through business schools and professional networks as a compelling case study in the critical importance of relationship building in international business. Her former company eventually managed to recover some of their Chinese clients through aggressive pricing and new management, but they never regained the trust and dominant market position they'd carelessly thrown away. Robert Harrison left the company 6 months later, after a board investigation revealed that the decision to fire Sarah had been made without proper consultation or understanding of the potential consequences. The investigation also uncovered that Sarah's division had been the most profitable in the company, making her termination not just culturally insensitive, but financially devastating. Sarah occasionally received updates about her former colleagues through industry connections and felt a mixture of sympathy and vindication. They were fundamentally good people who had been caught in a corporate system that prioritized short-term cost savings over long-term relationship building and sustainable business practices. Her new firm continued to grow steadily, built on the unshakable foundation of trust and mutual respect that had sustained her through her darkest professional moment. Every time she welcomed a new client or celebrated a successful project completion, Sarah remembered the painful but valuable lesson that had changed her life forever. The most important business relationships are often the ones that survive when everything else falls apart around them. Those relationships become the foundation for building something even better than what came before. Her Chinese partners hadn't just refused to accept her firing. They had helped her transform that devastating setback into the foundation of something better than she had ever imagined possible. The corporate world had taught her about efficiency and profit margins, but her Chinese friends had taught her about loyalty, respect, and the long-term value of treating business partners like family members who deserved trust and consideration. The rain that had pelted the windows on the day of her firing had given way to brilliant sunshine, and Sarah Chen Martinez stood in her new office, looking out at the harbor where ships brought goods from around the world in a daily dance of international commerce. Her phone buzzed with a WeChat message from Mrs. Chen at the dumpling restaurant. "Sarah, saw the news about your company in the Chinese Business Journal. We're all so proud of you. You showed them what real guanxi means." Sarah smiled, understanding that she had not only survived her professional crisis, but had emerged significantly stronger and more fulfilled than before. The relationships she had built weren't just business connections. They were bridges between cultures, built on mutual respect and genuine care for each other's success. And those bridges, she had learned through painful experience, were strong enough to support not just her career, but her entire future and the futures of countless others who would benefit from her work. The Chinese business community hadn't just refused to accept her firing. They had helped her transform it into the foundation of something revolutionary in the world of international business consulting.